Welcome to Mighty KO. Today we'll be talking about one championship on one TNT 1. One championship won on TNT 1 is probably the most anticipated fight event of the promotional calendar for two very good reasons. The first reason is that this will be the first event in the promotion's history that will be shown directly to a North American audience. One CEO Chatri Sitchatong has been talking about this move since at least 2019. Second biggest reason is that its main event features a flyweight title fight between current champion Adriano Moraes versus who many consider the greatest pound-for-pound fighter of all time, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. We'll talk about that fight a little later on, but first, let me just get something off my chest real quick. One championship, one on TNT 1. Try saying that 3 times quick. We need to rehire the guy that came up with the event titles before the COVID-19 lockdowns. Before COVID-19 hit, One Championship had arguably the best event titles in the entire MMA industry. They gave us Unstoppable Dreams, Warriors of Light, Enter the Dragon, and a lot more. It gave the events that atmosphere of epicness that made you want to watch them, and scattered the star power throughout the entire card instead of just the main and co-main events. We need to go back to those epic titles instead of the one title and numbered sequences that we have now. I understand the need for them back in the Bangkok bubble when the organization was just putting together whatever fight they could and put out a product just to satisfy the stakeholders. But now that they're back in Singapore, they need to put that creativity back. They need to put those titles back. They need to be epic again. Now let's get to the fights. The first fight is a heavyweight clash between Mehdi Bargi and Omar Kane, who's better known as Rugrug. This is probably the least important, or at least least interesting fight to me, because it doesn't really matter who wins the fight. The winner is still going to be far off from any kind of title conversation or even the top 5, which is saying a lot considering how thin the One Championship heavyweight division is. And a lot of that is because both fighters are relatively new to MMA and they haven't really put on the best kind of performance that people would have liked from heavyweights that would make a splash in the division. Let's start with Mehdi Bargi. Mehdi Bargi was one of the 4 Iranians that One Championship signed and tried to promote heavily back in August of 2020. He had his debut against Kang Ji-won, and there's really no other way to say this, but he got destroyed by the South Korean. He was supposed to be the better wrestler of the two, but he got outplayed and reversed, and when he got full mounted, Kang Ji-won just started wailing on him, going some ground and pound until he started bleeding from the face. It was not a good showing by any stretch of the imagination. A lot of MMA articles described the win for Kang Ji-won as a comeback, but there's really no way that you can call this a comeback because it's a first round knockout. There's no way a first round knockout can ever be described as a comeback. Moving on to his opponent, Rugrug, he had his debut against Alain Nalani, and even though he did win this fight, it doesn't really mean that much because he won against Alain Nalani. The man hasn't won a fight since 2018, and I don't really have anything else to go on regarding Rugrug's skills because, to be honest, he really didn't show much until the very dying seconds of the round. He did show us some savvy takedown skills when he tripped Nalani and then proceeded to ground and pound him until the end of the fight. But other than that, there's really nothing much I can see to Rogru that would set him apart from the rest of the field. Power-wise, he doesn't look like, well, he does look like he should have one-shot knockout power, but he didn't take Nalani out with one shot. So power-wise, he does have that question mark on him. He did do that sweet-looking trip to take Nalani to the ground and keep him in position as he punched him in the face, but whether that's to his actual skill or to the lack of Nalani's skill is kind of hard to tell. As for the fight against Medibargi, I am going to have to go with Medibargi on that one, because even though I ragged on the Iranian a while ago, he did showcase a lot of wrestling skill in that losing effort against Kang Ji-won. Rugrug doesn't seem to know or care about takedown defense in his fight against Nalani, and that's really the reason why I'm willing to give Bargi a chance here. So to me, this fight is definitely Medibargi's to lose. If he does lose to Rugrug, his stock falls even lower from, okay, he's not as good as advertised, to why did we even sign him? So if Rugrug loses the fight, doesn't really change much. If he wins, he'll be on a 2-fight win streak, and I see him being matched up against someone like maybe Mauro Cirilli or even Kang Ji-won, just to get the next title challenger off once Brandon Vera versus Arjan Blar is over and done with. The next fight is another heavyweight fight, but this time in one Super Series kickboxing between Rade Opacic and Patrick Schmidt. Now, I have to start this off by saying that I have next to nothing to say about Patrick Schmidt, and it's really not his fault because this is going to be his debut fight in one Super Series, so I really have next to no information about him. All I know is that he's only had one kickboxing fight before this, and that was a loss. So I'm much more excited to see Rade Opacic in this fight because of the hook kick knockout that he landed on Errol Zimmerman back in One Big Bag 2, if I'm not mistaken. The most exciting thing about a Rade Opacic win here is that it would mark his third fight in a row that ended in a victory. So with that streak going on, he has a very strong case to challenge the champion Tariq Kababes. And given how thin the One Super Series heavyweight ranks are, a title fight is something of a rarity. So I think One Championship needs to bank hard on the Opacic hype train and give him a title shot as quickly as possible. If not, give him as many chances to build his case as possible. The next fight is a welterweight clash between Tyler Maguire and Raymond Magomedaliev, and this is going to be my vote for the show stealer of the night, because both Tyler Maguire and Raymond Magomedaliev are absolute beasts. Before Tyler Maguire came into One Championship, he was on more on a 10-fight plus win streak and debuted against title challenger Luis Sapo Santos, and he won that fight. So he was definitely a guy to look out for. Fortunately, he didn't get the chance to test his skills against Ben Askren because he retired and vacated the title before Tyler Maguire could really collect steam for that run. But he did get an immediate title shot against Sebastian Kadestam, and I think he was handily winning that fight before Kadestam threw that Hail Mary in the last 30 seconds of the round. Unfortunately, Tyler didn't take that loss very well, and he disappeared for about 2 years before coming back to win again against Agilan Tani. Raymond Magomedaliev, on the other hand, has a bit of a different story because his start wasn't as good as Tyler's was. His debut with one championship, unfortunately, was against James Nakashima, and the American gave the Russian his first ever loss. He also disappeared for around 2 years after that fight, but came out strong in 2020, ironically. He faced Joey Pierotti and Edson Marks, winning both fights in the first round. Now, he was supposed to face Sebastian Kadestam earlier this year, but unfortunately that fight was cancelled and he's now facing Tyler. So both of these guys have very ground intensive games, so we can expect a lot of sprawls, a lot of switching, a lot of wrestling basically. Though Magomedaliev's win against Edson Marks was a knockout right cross, I think that was more of a fluke than anything else. Look for both men to try to establish their dominance on the ground, advance their position in the welterweight rankings. As to who I think would win the fight, I'm actually not sure about this one, and I think it's too close to call. Both guys are top-level athletes. Nobody is doing themselves any favors by sleeping on them. The only sure thing is that it's going to be an entertaining fight. The first fight of the main card is a Muay Thai fight between Rodtang Jitwangnon and a guy named Daniel Williams. The only thing I have to say about this fight is good luck to you, Daniel. I hope coming in on short notice was worth it. Okay, fine, I'll elaborate. Rodtang Jitwangnon is basically the face of One Championship Muay Thai right now. He has an exciting style. He's so far undefeated in One Championship, and it doesn't seem like anything hurts him. It doesn't matter how hard you hit him in the head, how hard you kick him in the shins. He's just gonna plow through it and even dance in front of you if you even try to knock him out. Rodtang Jitwangnon is the epitome of his moniker, the Iron Man. There is nothing and no one that can hurt him right now. He is literally invincible, and I doubt anyone coming out of nowhere is going to hurt Rodtang Jitwangnon in a straight up Muay Thai fight. Danielle Williams is a late replacement for Jacob Smith, who even that guy was seen as a bit of an outsider, a bit of a newcomer who's coming in to challenge arguably the best Muay Thai fighter of his generation, only to get destroyed. So I'm really not fancying Daniel's chances here. Hopefully he can get someone around his own skill level in his next few fights and work his way back up to challenge Rodtang again in the near future. Now we're entering the co-main event of the night, Eddie Alvarez versus Yuri Lapkus. Two men who have diverging fates right now. Eddie Alvarez is coming off of a comeback submission win over Edward Folayang, and Yuri Lapkus, let's say he tripped against current champion Christian Lee. I really don't need to say much about Eddie Alvarez accept that he really is the underground underdog comeback king of MMA. After getting his eyes torn out by Cosmo Alexander in his debut fight with One Championship, and then having his legs kicked out of him by Edward Fariang, he really is starting to show the grit that made him famous and successful back in the UFC and Bellator. Yuri Lapicus is a bit on the opposite spectrum in that he was seen as a prodigy, a phenom, as soon as he entered the One Championship circle. His first win was against Shannon Weirachai, wherein he stood toe-to-toe with the striking legend and beat him at his own game, which is basically the same story as his second fight, where he met Marat Gafarov, who was coming up in weight, and not only did he beat him using the rear naked choke, which was Gafarov's signature move. That was enough to book a title fight with Christian Lee, but the Warrior pretty much handled the Moldovan easily. The fight really opened up a lot of questions regarding Lapicus's heart and actual skill, and a lot of people are wondering if we saw more in him than there actually was. Is he really as good as we think he is? Because when he fought Shannon Weirachai, he was not at the best place in his career, talking about Weirachai. And Marat Gafarov did just come up in weight. There are those asterisks and questions regarding Yuri Lapicus, especially after that title fight. Those same questions are literally non-existent when talking about Eddie Alvarez. We know how good he is, we know how much heart he has. This main event really is going to be a fateful, decisive moment in the careers of both men. If Eddie Alvarez wins, that's a straight line to the title shot. He can enter the top 5 quite easily. He can challenge Christian Lee almost immediately after that because of the name that he has. Yuri isn't in the same boat in that if he loses here, it'll pretty much confirm that he was a derailed hype train. Which is unfortunate because I truly think that he does have the skills, and that what we saw in the Weirachai and Gafarov fights wasn't all smoke and mirror tricks. He definitely can fight, but there is something that happened in that Christian Lee fight that tripped him up. If he does win, that's good news for Lapicus, but not by much. He'll have to fight his way back up through the top 5 and justify a rematch with Christian Lee, which we're talking about the lightweight division here. It's probably the first or second most competitive division in One Championship, maybe third after flyweight and featherweight. As for who I think will win the fight, I'm leaning heavily towards Eddie Alvarez, mainly because he has that momentum and experience to face any kind of adversity that Lapicus might actually throw at him. Lapicus has energy and youth, but would that be enough to beat the Underground King? I don't think so.
Now we arrive at the main event, Adriano Moraes versus Demetrius Johnson. To say that this is the most anticipated fight in One Championship's recent history is pretty much an understatement. We have been waiting for this fight ever since the announcement of the DJ Askren trade, because everyone and their grandma knew that DJ is fighting for the title. There's no one else that's worthy of challenging the champion at that point as soon as that trade was announced. How did we get here? This is a fight that's 2 years in the making. It was supposed to come about last year before coronavirus hit, and I think that was the biggest blow to the promotion because of the virus. I mean, you can forget about Brandon Vera and Arjun Bular. You can forget about Angla Unsang versus Rainier Deridier, but you cannot forget about DJ versus Moraes. But they didn't give DJ the automatic title shot right away, even though no one would complain or bat an eye if they did that. They went to the Grand Prix route. They didn't give the UFC guys the automatic championship fights that a lot of people were expecting them to do. This is in large part because of the Sage Northcutt knockout. Sage Northcutt was, I think, the first high-profile UFC signing that one had after he got cut from UFC, and that debut didn't really go so well, and we haven't really seen Sage since. So when One Championship acquired Eddie Alvarez and DJ, they were a bit more careful about what they were going to do with both superstars, and they built Grand Prix events or Grand Prix tournaments specifically centered around those two. So unsurprisingly, DJ won his tournament, and now he's fighting Adriano Moraes. Now, as for expectations for the fight, DJ and Moraes is one of those weird fights where the champion is the underdog, and everybody knows it. Moraes even talks about it at one point during an interview that he is the underdog and he accepts it. That's just how good DJ is, and Moraes is going to prove that he is the champion, he has the belt, and he's going to keep it. Now, the major consensus, the overwhelming consensus, is that DJ will win. Might not be a knockout, it might not be a submission, but DJ will win. But what happens if it's an upset and Moraes wins? That would be, I think, the biggest shock that the MMA world will ever experience. Not only will One Championship prove that no, the UFC is not where the best fighters are, and good fighters are everywhere from around the world, but it'll really cement One Championship's clout in that, again, this will be the first event shown directly to a North American audience. Now, who will be most surprised if an upset does occur? Everybody in North America and the West is going to be totally shocked. Even every fan of the One Championship will be shocked as well, but probably not as shocked as a lot of people might think, because we've watched Moraes for, I think, almost a decade now, and we know what he can do. Mikinho can fight, and he's way better than anyone that DJ has faced in One Championship so far. We're gonna be shocked, but we're not gonna be as, that super shocked. Again, the interesting parts of this fight is going to lie in the upset. What's Mikinho gonna do? Will he be able to stop DJ? Will he be able to overcome the wrestling, etc., etc.? If DJ wins, that just cements his status as the greatest of all time, and for that reason I am going to lean heavily for DJ to win, but I'm not gonna say I'm gonna be sad if Moraes pulls an upset, because that would mean the world to Asian mixed martial arts, or like global mixed martial arts outside of the UFC. There's a lot riding on this fight, I think, not just for these two men, but for the legacies of the companies that they represent. In DJ's case, the company that he used to represent. Because make no mistake, he is still seen as the UFC guy, even after all these years. Anyway, this is gonna be a great fight. This has been Mighty Sports KO. My name is Red. This is my thoughts on One Championship, one on TNT 1. Talk to you after the card, share my thoughts on those fights. Peace.